Family. Welcome to the Moment of Clarity, Lessons in Leadership. I'm Dr. Williams. We're here in the Leadership Lounge, and we're going to talk about, for a few moments today, reflection. I believe that reflection is the most underappreciated practice in leadership. Listen, if you're not reflecting, then chances are you're not growing. And if you are a leader in any capacity, you should be more concerned with your daily growth. And if you're not reflecting, you're not growing. Listen, reflection is a key component to growth. How often do you look at your practices? How often do you look at your procedures? How often do you look at your daily strategies that you use to get better? I don't care if you're a mother, you're a father, you're a leader of an organization or a school. If you're not reflecting, you're not growing. Listen, and because reflection causes us to have to look inside ourselves, it causes us to have to do some things that we don't like to do. Oftentimes, leaders do not reflect. And your growth is in direct proportion to your intentionality and your frequency of reflection. Listen, reflection turns experience into insight. I was talking to one of my staff members this week, and he has a student intern in his classroom. And he said to me, Doc, listen, experience is the best teacher. And I said, no, experience with reflection is the best teacher. Listen, we don't learn just from experience. We learn from reflecting on that experience. And so my question to you this morning is, how often do you reflect? How often do you think about how well you're parenting your kids? How often do you think about how well you're leading your organization? How often do you reflect and you turn and do something different? Listen, in one of the most famous stories in the Bible called the prodigal son, there's a key phrase in that story that really exemplifies reflection. After he squanders all of his money, after he runs away, after he uses everything he has and he lives a rioted lifestyle, he says this. The scripture says, he came to himself. Listen, he began to reflect on his practices. And he changed. Listen, you are doing people, if you're a leader, you are doing people a disservice if you're not reflecting. You're not leading people well if you're not reflecting. You're not changing people's lives with the potential that you have to do it if you're not reflecting. And so today, for a few minutes, we want to talk about how critical, how powerful reflection is in the life of a leader, and 3 things that you need to do if you're going to reflect and grow, because you're not growing if you're not reflecting. Here's the first thing you have to do. You have to, number 1, be intentional. You have to be intentional about your reflection. Listen, if you don't make time to reflect, you won't do it. Let me say that again. If you don't make time to reflect, you won't reflect. And so we have to be critical. We have to be intentional about how we make time to do things. Listen, we always say there's not enough time in a day, but we can find time to do the things that we want to do. And you have to find time in your schedule to reflect. Listen, one thing that I read is it said every leader should spend 10 minutes a day in silence, reflecting. And I've tried to make that a practice in my life over the past couple weeks to spend some time. And it's very difficult to find intentional time to be silent and to reflect. And if you don't make time to do it, you're not going to do it. Listen, you will grow at the rate of the frequency of your reflection. Right. So if you're not taking time on a regular basis to reflect, then you're not intentional about your own growth. And if you're a leader and you're not intentional about your growth, then you are falsely leading other people. You're not adequate as a leader if you're not intentional about your growth. Listen, you can't manage what you don't measure. Let me say that again. You can't manage what you don't measure. So the frequency by which you measure your practices, the frequency by which you measure how you do things as a leader will determine good days, bad days, good weeks, good months. I don't care. If you're in a business and you don't measure your progress on a weekly basis or on a daily basis, then you're going to consistently have bad days and bad weeks. But the frequency by which you reflect and you measure those things will determine how quickly you grow. Listen, so the first thing when we begin to talk about reflection is the fact that you have to be intentional about it. Here's the second thing: you have to be still. Listen, remember I talked about that 10 minutes a day sitting in silence? You have to be still if you're going to reflect. And that's something that we struggle to do in our Western culture, is to be still, because everything is moving so quickly. Everything is done so fast. We want everything in a microwavable way, right? That we don't take time to sit and be still. And if you're going to reflect, you've got to be still. That may not necessarily be physically, but mentally, you have to find a space where you can be still, so that you can reflect on how you can be a better mother, how you can be a better father, a better husband, better wife, a better leader of your organization. And if you don't take that time to be still and reflect, then you're saying initially that you're not intentional about your own growth. And any leader that is not intentional about their own growth is inadequate. Let me say that again. Any leader that's not intentional about their own growth is inadequate. And so you have to take time to be still. Number one, you've got to be intentional. That means you have to find time to reflect, right? I'm not saying you have to do this every day. I'm not saying you have to do this every week, but the frequency by which you reflect is going to determine how quickly you grow. Listen, the third thing you have to do after you're intentional and you're still is you have to be honest. Listen, that's why we don't want to reflect a lot of times, because we have to be honest about our own practices. We have to sit back and say, you know what? I'm the problem, and this is how I need to fix it. We can't post the blame on someone else when we're reflecting on our own practices. We have to be intentional, be still, and we have to be honest. Listen, you have to find the gap between where you are and where you want to be. And you do that by establishing the truth. Where am I? Where do I want to go? But why am I there? Why is there a gap? Maybe there's a gap because I have a limiting belief, right? Maybe there's a gap between where I am and where I want to go because I don't have the skill set that I need to get to where I want to go, right? That's an easy fix there. Right? Maybe there's a gap because I haven't been intentional about my practices. Maybe there's a gap because I haven't done what I was supposed to do. And as a leader, you can't be afraid to ask yourself those questions to figure out how you grow. Listen, if you're going to be an exceptional elite leader in whatever capacity you're leading in. See, sometimes people think this is just business or this is just a school or whatever, but you're leading in your home. And if you're going to be exceptional, if you're going to be an exceptional mother, an exceptional father, if you're going to be an exceptional human being, you have to be intentional about growth. And the only way you're going to be intentional about growth is to be intentional about reflection. Listen, I want you to think about that this week. It's Labor Day week. I want you to think about, how can I reflect better? How can I measure better so that I can manage better, right? If I reflect, then I can grow. And if I grow, then I can lead better. And you have to be intentional about your growth and about the growth of those that follow you. Listen, leave me a comment below. Like, share, and subscribe. And remember, if no one's following you, you're just walking. Until next time.